Greg Savage, good morning. How are you?
Very well, Pete. How are things with you?
I'm very well, thank you. Down here in lockdown Melbourne, we're coming to grips with further lockdown, but is what it is. Is what it is. I think we were all a bit miserable and grumpy yesterday, but I think we're okay today. We'll get through it.
Yeah, well, it must be. My daughter lives in Melbourne, actually. She's a vet student. Luckily, she's also got a job at a vet, so she does, and that's an essential service apparently. So she gets out 2-3 days a week. Otherwise, I think she'd be going stir crazy for sure.
Yeah. Well, Greg, thank you for coming on to Recruitment Journeys, the podcast series. It's the second time you've been on as a guest, but this one, I guess, is a bit special. We're not going to focus so much on your journey, but we're going to talk about COVID-19, the impact thus far, but as importantly, what the road to recovery looks like for the recruitment industry. I'm just keen to get your expert opinion on all of the above, if you'd be so kind. But just kicking off, Greg, can you tell us what is your own personal COVID experience been like thus far? Where should you have been in the world? Should you have been somewhere doing a talk somewhere?
Well, to answer the first part of your question, as I gave my 19-year-old son a little bit of a lecture on about 4 weeks of the lockdown when he was whinging, that our journey has been comparatively a breeze. Yes, there have been moments of stress, particularly about my clients. Yes, there have been personal changes, and in his case, cricket was cancelled. Real big deal issues like that. So, in the most case, no, it's been challenging business-wise, but really nothing to complain about, which is probably true, actually of all of us, even you guys in Melbourne. I know it's been incredibly tough.
Yeah.
But you're not in a slum in Mumbai with 20 of you in a room and half of you with COVID. So we're better off than most, and we've got to remember that, because it's been tough, but certainly in my case, I've got nothing to complain about. I found one interesting thing is that no travel, and I travel all the time. I've got clients in several states, New Zealand, overseas. So this is the first time, I'd say, in 25 years that I haven't traveled for 4 or 5 months. And actually, that's been a very good thing. I didn't realize how much throwing my routine out, more family time. Actually, ironically, closer to clients in a way, because speaking to them far more often. And certainly in March and April this year, almost every day, a lot of them. So in a weird way, the COVID thing has been good. I feel as though this is an intensely personal comment, but I feel as though I've been helpful to my clients. So I like to feel that that's the case all the time, but I think in a couple of cases, some advice may well have saved their company. So that's rewarding, I guess. And as far as the overall industry is concerned, well, I think a lot of people have stood up very well from our industry, actually, over the last 4 or 5 months. There's been good sharing and a lot of support. And in my case, I was tempted for about 2 minutes to sort of say, I could open up a few bottles of Shiraz and just sit this out. But, that would have been weak and unhelpful. So I've tried to share as much information and ideas. And not that I've ever been through a COVID, but I've been through a lot of recessions and I've been through a lot of dramatic situations. And it's time for calm heads as best you can be to deal with. So it's been, yes, of course it's been stressful in some ways, but I wouldn't compare myself to those people far worse off, and there have been benefits.
Yeah, well, look, one of the wonderful things that there are many silver linings of COVID, many. And I think one of the wonderful things that I've witnessed is that we as a recruitment industry, we've abandoned all sense of competition temporarily. I'm sure it'll come back, and we're all putting an arm around each other and just trying to drag the rest of us through it. And it's been good to see some real camaraderie. Well, Greg, let's get to the juicy stuff. Here to talk about COVID. I actually looked at one of your posts only this morning. So just to give a sense of the landscape, I'll just quote some quick stats that came from you this morning. 36,000 agency recruiters have been fired. 1,200 recruiting firms have gone into liquidation. Perm sales down 47% year on year. that's where we are. That has been the impact. That's the $6 million question from me, Greg. Where are we? Where are we in the recovery cycle? We're almost 6 months in now. If this is a marathon, are we halfway there yet?
Well, anyone who makes predictions about the future is a fool. So of course I will. And I know that you're referring to a blog I wrote a few months ago about which I know you're also infatuated with, because I said we're on, I think I said we're on the 5th kilometer of a marathon, which is 42 kilometers, and you followed up a month later and said, where are we now? I regret using that analogy because it was only meant to mean we've got a long way to go. Actually, not going to sugarcoat it. This marathon we're on is a weird one where you can go backwards. I mean, you would have to say in Melbourne, if we were at the 5 kilometer mark 2 months ago, we're at the 3 kilometer mark now. You know, we are, I guess the main point of that blog has been proven to be accurate in that it's a long road. I don't think there's any V-shaped recovery. And Melbourne will come out of its thing and will bounce back definitely quickly in the short term. But let me be perfectly frank with you. I'm making predictions and I'm not an economist, but it will take years to get back to where we were in 2019. Now, that's a nuanced statement. You know, that article you're looking at now, my blog this morning, and people should read my blog, gregsavage.com.au, and then we can double our readers if somebody else adds to Pete's readership. That blog quoted some figures which said that revenue in our industry in Australia has gone back $4.4 billion in a year. I mean, that is absolutely mind-boggling. And the quote from that article, which I quoted from IBIS World, was that it's wiped out a decade of industry growth. So this is the thing, you know, when you say where are we, it depends what you want to look at as your starting point. Where are we in terms of getting back that $4.4 billion? Well, we've got most of the marathon to go. Where are we in terms of more jobs coming in and activity? Well, that's closer, right? So again, quoting from that article, I don't know how they put these stats together, but they say the economy is going to grow over the next 0.5 years. I think they say at 2.2% a year, but the industry, our industry, is going to grow at 3.8% a year. Now, I don't know if those figures are right, Pete, but what I can tell you is that in all the recessions I've been through, the recruitment industry has grown much faster than the economy coming out of it, because people over-prune the tree. Look how many people have lost their jobs in the last 6 months. I'm not talking about our industry, I'm talking about the economy. And look at your state where people can't work. If you're a hospitality worker or whatever it is, or a gym dude or whatever, you can't work. It's against the law, right? So those jobs will come back and that will spark activity. But I think we can expect a long, slow road to recovery, but getting better in a bumpy way. You know, people talk about V-shape and W-shape. I talk about elongated W. It's already happened like that. I mean, it got better. We came out of lockdown first time around. I mean, all my clients' job numbers were increasing. Then Melbourne going into its second wave impacted the whole country. Obviously impacted Melbourne worse than anywhere, but impacted the whole country in terms of confidence. God forbid that there's a third wave anywhere. But that kind of thing could happen, in which case we will be up and down, up and down. So it's a long road, but getting better.
Okay, so let's assume that we do manage to control the numbers, touch wood. What do you think the next 6 months look like? Yeah,
I think it's going to be a grind. I think there'll be more job losses in our industry, actually. I think more recruitment companies will go into liquidation. I think a lot of them are I know for a fact that a lot of them are being supported by JobKeeper, and there's nothing else between that where they are now and liquidation other than the JobKeeper. So otherwise, revenues have got to jump quickly, or they're not going to survive, and I don't think they all will. I'm sorry, this is not. There are good things, and we'll come to them.
Yeah.
But I think unemployment in our country will rise. I think we've got a slow Christmas period, coming up. economically, and it's always slow, but I think it'll be a longer one. And the final sort of barrier, and it's a bit of a pothole, is the looming March date when JobKeeper is mooted to finish totally. And that's going to affect the recruitment industry, but in fact, I don't know, I reckon unless the economy improves, about 1 million jobs in Australia. So I'm nervous about that. But there will be bursts of activity. I mean, as you said, let's say Melbourne comes out of lockdown when they say, let's say that immediately sparks a little bit of an upturn that gives confidence across the country. There might be a burst of hiring between I don't know, October and Christmas. I think contractors will be used in bigger numbers. Maybe after Australia Day, when the summer sort of holiday's over, it will go again. But there are a lot of unknowns, right? On the negative, there's another wave of COVID infection somewhere in the country. On the positive, there's very low, infections, confidence returning, the borders opening in 7 states, they say. They even talk about a vaccination. I mean, I don't know how serious that is, starting in January. So there are a lot of unknowns which could really change all these predictions. But based on what we know now, I would describe it as a, in the gym, they have those medicine balls, those big giant balls that don't really bounce. I think it'd be like that. Look, slow, ponderous bounce, but upwards at least. So that defies the gravity of a medicine ball, but upwards, I think. And it's quite possible that, to look at some better scenarios, that it picks up in the first quarter of next year. The virus is well controlled. Our borders open, our state borders first, and maybe even a vaccine. And then a lot of people will be, I think the interesting thing is we'll get the underlying shortages of talent in skills in Australia haven't gone away. There's not more developers and there's not more great recruiters around. It's just less jobs. So when those jobs come back, ironically, I think we'll be scrambling for talent for our clients. And I think our industry will be front and center of putting people back into jobs because there'll be a flood. I don't think it's going to be, as I said, massive, but I think there will be surges. And also, as you know, and I don't have figures on this, but anecdotally, but universally anecdotally, I'm being told that internal recruiters have lost their jobs too. You'd probably be well aware of that. And that would suggest to me that companies are going to need our help for another reason. So there's an opportunity for us to step in and take that void. I feel no joy at all that anyone in internal recruitment lost their jobs, obviously. There's nothing good in that. But on the other hand, there is an opportunity for us to prove that we can play that role. And I don't think companies are going to be quick to rebuild their internal teams as the pace that they've done in the past, if we can step in. So there will be opportunities. I think clients will be ROI obsessed, Pete. I think they'll over-engineer their job descriptions. They'll be wanting everything. Clients will think it's easy to recruit in this market, and we have got to be very skilled at explaining it's actually harder. And then candidate behavior will change too, and we can talk about that if you like.
Just going back to JobKeepers quickly, Greg, what do you think is going to be the instant kind of micro effect of JobKeepers coming off the table and all these recruitment businesses that have been propped up by JobKeepers? What's going to happen there?
Well, I'm on the board of 12 recruitment companies, so I'm completely on the inside. But I get approached and speak to, honestly, dozens of owners of recruitment companies every week who are asking, I think in a situation like mine, people think because I speak to so many recruitment companies, I've got some insights, and that's probably true. So that just means more people want to get a feeling for what's happening. So I'm speaking to a lot of people, and I guess what I'm seeing is that there are a lot of recruitment companies in this country whose GP per month is below their expenses. So that's a very basic accounting problem. And the gap is being made up by JobKeeper or drawing on cash reserves. Now, both of those things will run out. So that means that the conversation has to be, can we get our expenses down further? And in many cases, pretty much all cases, the only thing to tweak is salaries. And in many cases, that's on the bones of their bum anyway in terms of staff, right? So really the conversation needs to be about revenue. And that is the big unknown. Can between now and I think JobKeeper's going down some amount in October, but then in March it's going away. Can we by March next year, can those recruitment companies get their revenues up to cover their costs? And if they don't, I predict a wave of liquidations. And not only that, some recruitment companies saying that their clients who are in trouble are not paying their bills. So we've now got cash flow issues. Even if the P&L says break even, the balance sheet says we've got no money because people are, and particularly on the temp side, if you've got 10 temps in at a client and that client doesn't pay, that's enough to send a small company bust if they've accumulated 3 months of, and paid temps for 3 months and not being paid. So I am. I was going to say, I'm not predicting that. I'm not predicting that industry will collapse, but I'm predicting that some recruitment companies will not last. Already now, some of them are like zombie companies anyway, because they basically they're not paying their rent. They've got 2 or 3 people working from home, and they're scrambling a living, but there's nothing really there. And they're on JobKeeper. So as an owner of that business, when JobKeeper goes away, do you double down and keep funding that through Christmas out of your mortgage on your house? So that is, we've got to remember that that 80% of recruitment companies in Australia, 80% prior to the pandemic, had less than 10 staff. Well, I would say the average is now 5. That's 80% of our industry is 5-person businesses on JobKeeper. Yeah, that's how I feel about it. So look, our industry will be smaller when we come out of this. Our industry is still, Peter, in my view, under no threat. I believe that in a way we're going to become more important for some of the reasons I touched on. But I think it'll be a smaller industry, and I think we're going to have to change the way we deliver our services. Yeah, and there's some good things out of that.
Yeah, we'll definitely come back to that.
Yeah.
What mistakes do you think recruitment leaders? Because everybody's reacted differently, right? No, we all there was a lot of panic. There was a lot of running around the streets, not really knowing what to do. What mistakes do you think recruitment leaders made in the early days? Things that they could have done better.
Well, look, there were a lot of them, but one of them was not acting fast enough. And the thing about this downturn, but it's been different to all the others that I've been through in 40 years, is that with the others, it was much slower to evolve. You could, you had a quarter where they were saying GDP is down, and then another quarter and talks of recessions. Well, we just went from February into March, and suddenly we were being locked down, and jobs and revenue fell off a cliff. And I remember having one conversation with a client who said, "Hey, it's March. I'm going to wait till the end of April, and then we'll look at things." And I called him up and said, "Mate, you've got to get the management team together today because we have to make some decisions today." And he was like, "Greg, I think you're panicking." I said, "I'm not panicking. It's your company, and you're going to lose your company and your house." So then he started panicking, and we got the management decision. We made the decision, and it was a very, 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 very painful couple of days where we had to reduce staff numbers, etc. And after that week was done, he said to me, "I think we've cut too much." And a week later, he said to me, "I think we've cut too little." And if it wasn't for JobKeeper, we would have to have done it again, like everybody else. When JobKeeper came in, it saved thousands of recruitment jobs and other jobs, of course. Mm-hmm. So not acting fast enough on the cost base and just recalibrating what the reality was. The other side of it was overreacting, because it's a fine line. And I saw some people overreacting and panicking and letting too many people go and retreating into their cave and not remembering that there was still business to be won. So it wasn't all defensive. There was also about getting on the offensive and getting out. And I think for a while there, a lot of owners had a victim mentality. You know, I compare it to the 5 stages of grieving in life. They say, psychologists tell us that if human beings suffer a very grievous event in their life, they go through 5 stages, you know, denial and anger and various stages until they get to acceptance. There are a lot of owners who are sort of like, this isn't fair. This is, you know, it's the government, Chinese government, the virus, somebody. And it's like, well, hold on, it doesn't matter. You've got to focus on what you can control. It took a while for people. But I think there was also the leadership issues where people made mistakes. I think there was a lack of empathy in some cases, and ironically, too much empathy in others. I'll come back to that. A lack of empathy about how difficult it was for staff to work from home, homeschooling, salaries reduced, those sorts of things, and just expecting people to cope, but also not giving people a sense of purpose. I think one of the main jobs of a leader was just once you'd calibrated the cost, etc., to just give, people weren't making placements, they weren't even taking jobs. So why am I a recruiter? Is the question at the back of your mind, and you need to give them a sense of purpose. And then ironically, the other side of the same coin was, as a mistake, was as time went by, leaders over-empathizing. Now, what I mean by that is, plenty of leaders had conversations, I'll paraphrase, where it went something like this. My guys have been through a tough time, they've been locked down, salaries are down. I'm just saying to them, do your best, guys. I don't have big, and that is extremely unhelpful. I mean, you're at home, nothing's happening, you're trying to work hard, and your boss says, do your best. Well, you know, of course I'm doing my fucking best. That's not a helpful leadership goal. And the real, you know, the right thing was to balance empathy with outcomes. And actually what you needed to do was help your consultants and everybody have daily goals. So when they pulled up stumps at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, they could say, I had a good day. I connected with those people. I did those things. Okay, I didn't make a placement, but it was still a good day. And people need that, because you can't go months with no placements, no jobs, no activity, and still feel that there is a purpose to do the job. So remote management is something we all had to learn. Not focusing on productivity, even if the measure, the definition of productivity had changed. You know, we only really had one productivity measure at the end of the day in recruitment. It was billings. Well, if your people aren't making billings, but they're still good people, what's productivity? Oh, is it going on client visits? Oh, we can't do that. Is it taking jobs? Well, they're very hard. So what's productivity? Well, that was a leadership failure. And there was a lack of creativity in many cases in supporting. You know, I think a lot of leaders just sort of stuck with a very old formula of get on the phone and send out emails. Well, very, very difficult in a pandemic to get much return on that activity. So they needed to create tools to help the recruiters do their business development. Some have done that well. And just a couple more mistakes, I think. One was a knee-jerk pivot. I had a client say to me, we're an accounting recruiter, but Jesus, there's no business. We're going to get into healthcare. And I'm like, really? What have you got to offer someone in healthcare? Just list them for me. Have you got expertise? Have you got candidates? Have you got any clients? Have you got any knowledge? Have you got any networks? Have you got any credibility? You've got none of that. So going from accounting into healthcare, and meanwhile, there are healthcare recruitment companies who are all over it like a rash. So, you know, there was that kind of knee-jerk pivot that people were trying. I mean, I think pivoting and adapting was important, but it needed to be smart. And then some people responded by cutting their fees, which I think was a big mistake. And I know why, I understand, but that's not the answer. So there were some of the things, you know, and as I list them, Pete, it sounds very stark and very critical, and it's not meant to be, because when I've been through recessions as a business owner, I probably made all those mistakes more than once. But that's the sum total of, you know, not everyone did all those things, but those are the sorts of things people probably got wrong.
So let's flip that on the head, Greg. When we come out of this, what do you think are the kind of top 1 or 2 lessons that recruitment leaders will now have firmly planted in their minds?
Well, we hope that they've learned the lesson of what a sustainable business looks like, which, by the way, people like me have been preaching for since people like you were born. And getting excited about the profit from a perm-only business in a boom is So stupid, because they've been punished now as predicted. If you're only a perm business, you're in extreme trouble, even in this pandemic situation. So I think the lesson I hope will be learned is that we need to build a fully sustainable business where and it's not just having annuity revenue, temp and perm. It is that, but there's many, many other things. And now it's probably not the time to go into all of them, but I think building a truly sustainable business that is profitable in the upturn and very resilient in the downturn. But I think the other thing is, and I hope people are going to take advantage of this, and some of my clients and others are being very innovative, is to be honest and say we were fat and bloated before. You know, we went through a 10-year boom. People don't realize that, but in the 10 years up to February this year, that was a boom. Recruitment's never been as successful. Staffing industry revenues worldwide and in Australia at a peak all-time high. And yet profits from recruitment companies weren't growing at the same pace because we weren't running them efficiently. There are many things, transactional recruiters, recruiters not properly trained, recruiters' salaries and bonus structures changing to accommodate the shortage, and actually the recruiters made the money and the companies didn't, low margin PSLs, all those things I hope we've learned from. And I've also hoped, when I see that and I'm encouraging that owners are going to go out there and disrupt their own businesses. And this is a big message. You know, a lot of people say to me, recruitment will be different when we get through COVID. Let me tell you an analogy. I live in a suburb in the North Shore of Sydney. When we were locked down, I would go on my daily walk, as I've done for many years. And in the lockdown, suddenly people were more friendly. Morning! How's your family? People who'd walked past me every day for 10 years and never said a single word were now friendly. And my wife said, this is how COVID's going to change everything. We're going to be more connected as a community. Being a cynic, I said, no chance on God's green earth. Well, I'm right. I go on my walk now and those same people don't say a word. They go back to the way they were. And the risk is in recruitment, the analogy, the metaphor I'm trying to sort of portray here is that in recruitment, so many people in recruitment will be so grateful when jobs come back. They will go back and do everything the way they did before. And that will be a disaster because recruitment will only change if you configure a different future. So the things that some people are doing smartly, and I encourage anyone that owns, even a recruiter actually, to do going forward is to disrupt and to slaughter sacred cows, right? So why, the question you ask is, why do we do it this way? One of my clients said, why do we write one-page summaries of our candidates and attach them to a resume and send them to a client? He said to his team, and they said, because it's that summary that gets the candidate the interview. And he said, really? And he said, bullshit. And he banned it. Oh, uproar, tears virtually. We'll never get interviews. He said, no, what's going to happen is when you present your shortlist, you're going to call the client, you're going to go through the candidates, and their interview to resume rate went through the roof. And not a single client has ever mentioned the fact that they've missed these summaries, which were taking consultants with two fingers to type all day to type. So I think the biggest learning is we can disrupt, and we should. And there's many things that we can go into that later if you want. I mean, really, there are, terms of business, the companies what we consider to be a good client, right? And I've seen some of, ironically and counterintuitively, I've seen some of my clients actually fire their biggest but lowest margin clients in this environment, which I applaud, because we've got to do good business. Switching tack, the question you asked is one of the learnings, one of the biggest learnings a lot of recruitment leaders have learned, which is really fabulous, is that they can trust their staff to work from home and to work transparently and to do a day's work. Now, the biggest thing from working from home was, or remote working was, are they going to work? Well, in the vast majority of cases, that trust has been improved. So that was a huge, huge learning. As I said, low margin business, people who've got PSAs on low margin temps, and then the clients slowed up their payment, have been so badly hurt. Another big learning is shorter term planning. You know, some of my clients will say, oh, here's my budget for the next year and the year after. I'm like, really? You can tell? We just need 100-day sprints. 100 days. How are we going to get through the next 3 months? What's our expenses? What's our GP? What's our plan? Of course, you have longer term strategizing, but that's changing on an hourly basis. Some of them have got very good feet at managing remotely. You know, the flip side of what I said about the bad. Some have done a great job of keeping people engaged, great job of giving people, working with people on daily productivity measures, celebrations, games and fun, support, and very in tune with picking up whether someone was down and needed some extra support, giving people days off to get to recharge. So I think they've done that well, and others have been very good at coming up with inventive tools to engage with their clients, like webinars or quick surveys about what's going on in the market now, and giving their consultants tools to have sort of creative narrative with their clients, not just, hey, have you got a job? So there've been some very good learnings, and some recruitment leaders have really taken the chance to start the journey of reinventing their business and become better leaders. And you talked about silver linings, and I think that's probably a question later on, but one of them is that I think it's sharpened the leadership skills of people, and it's made some companies much tighter and more bonded together, even though they're not sitting in the same room. They are actually closer than they were before, which is a tremendous achievement by the leadership of those companies.
So let's take the spotlight off the poor old recruitment leaders for a moment. Let's talk about the recruiters at the coal face. Hopefully they've started to implement what they need, and hopefully we're not asking this question a bit too late. But what can they do at the coal face? What's best practice for a recruitment consultant to get through these tough times?
Well, the first thing is mental, I think. And I guess people have adjusted to this, and it's a bit like what I said about leaders. They've got to get to acceptance that this is the way it's. Now, for a long time, there was a couple of reactions from recruiters. I'll sit this one out. I just got to hold my breath and retire into my cave, and COVID will wash over me, and then it'll be gone, and I'll phoenix out of this. Well, that's not going to happen. We're going to have to really, run the marathon, as we've said. And it's going to be long. So I guess acceptance that there's a new order is the first step. And the second thing is a mental decision not to have a victim mentality and to take charge of your own journey through this shitstorm. That's the best advice I can give to a recruiter. Don't be thinking, well, my company this, and the prime minister that, and the premier this, and it's not fair. You take charge. How you respond to this situation is the only thing you've got control over. And it actually is incredibly empowering to say, okay, I can control how I respond.
Yeah.
And of course, it's going to take resilience, so that's the final thing. But resilience, to me, means not being tough and macho and sucking it up. I think in an environment like this, and in a job like recruitment, it's very emotional. And I think it's fine to have a cry, or need to take an afternoon off, or, in my case, have 19 beers, whatever it is. That's probably not the best advice, but it's okay to feel the emotion. What resilience is bouncing back. So you've had a bad day, you've had a bad afternoon, the one job you're working on fell through. Wasted emotion is dragging that negativity forward for 5 days and still talking about it and still behaving as though that's, dominating your life. Real resilience means next conversation I have with a client, candidate, or colleague, I'm going to be upbeat, regardless of my disappointment. That's where we have to be, because there's going to be a lot of disappointment. So I think the advice for recruiters is, first of all, have a good look at yourself. And this is going to sound very harsh, but if you look at yourself and you say to yourself, yes, I am what Greg Savage describes me as, which is a transactional, resume spamming, resume flicking, LinkedIn spamming, transactional hack. Is that what you really are? And, that sounds really offensive, but it's only offensive. It's not offensive if it's true. If it's not true, don't take offense at it. And if it's true, which for many recruiters it was, because in the boom, you could make money in recruitment by just keyword matching jobs to resumes and sending off some resumes attached to an email and making a few interviews, and you could make placements. That was completely transactional. And I think that the thing that recruiters should be thinking of is, how do I, if that is what I'm like, or half what I'm like, that's okay. That's a journey. But I've got to move from the transactional to the relationship building to the consultative. Now, I'm fully aware that those sound like cliches, so let me drill into it. Recruiters have to have the credibility, the relationship building skills, so that their clients will give them the time to take a proper job order, a qualified job order, that the clients will give them the job exclusively. Recruiters have got to have the skills to ask questions and to push back. That is what consulting is. You know, when I go to a doctor, I don't tell her what's wrong with me and what pills she will give me. I'll tell her what my symptoms are, and she will ask 1,000 questions and diagnose and tell me the solution. If I go to a lawyer for a contract, I don't say this is what we're going to say in the contract. I say this is what I'm trying to achieve. He asks 1,000 questions, and he gives me the advice because he's consultative, and I trust him. Even a fucking house painter to come and paint my house, I might say, hey, I want this sort of paint on this side of my house, and he might say, well, I wouldn't do that because the sun is going to cause that to peel after 6 months, and I'll take his advice because he's credible, right? So I know these are kind of inane, very simplistic metaphors or analogies, but they are so true. Most recruiters do not have the credibility because they're so transactional to actually consult. So consulting is questioning, it's influencing, it's persuading, it's creating outcomes. It's getting, the big word is the C word, it's commitment. That's what it is. I wouldn't go to 6 doctors and then choose the advice that I liked. Unless I didn't trust the first doctor, then I might get a second opinion. And then I might get a third, and then a fourth, and then a fifth. But then, you know, really, I've given up. None of them have been consultative. So I think the main thing is that as an industry and as individuals, this is our best chance in 40 years, probably longer, that's as long as I've been around, our best chance to emerge from this and redefine how recruitment works. And it would be so much better if clients gave every job to a recruiter exclusively. You know, I'll go as far as to saying that most of the harm and negativity in our industry and bad outcomes comes from multi-listed job orders. Clients get worse service, candidates get appalling service, and recruiters suffer stress, work longer hours, and earn less money. And our whole industry is pushed towards working on the basis of speed instead of quality. Yeah. So that's what recruiters should be focusing on now. And if you want me to go into what they should actually spend their, you know, I've got four things they should spend their time on every day. If you want me to go into that much detail, but generically, that's what they should be doing.
Absolutely. Well, look, if you can bullet point those.
Yeah. Well, I would say that there's 4 things recruiters should focus on. This is really what they, you know, when they wake up in the morning, they should look at these 4 things. First thing is, if you've got any job orders that are open, what I call jobs in play, yeah, you should be all over them like a rash, like you've never been before, because job orders are going to be perishable. Now, the word perishable means, in my context, means, this is the definition. Every minute that your job order stays open, there's more chance you won't fill it. That, by the way, is a truism of recruitment, but now it's been magnified. So, you know, some of us are working 4-day weeks and 3-day. I don't really give a continental. If you've got an open job, you get candidates up, you're all over that client, you're all over filling that job. Why? Because we need to get people jobs, 1. 2, you need the affirmation and the self-esteem. You're making a few placements, and your company, trust me, needs the revenue. So we've got to be all over every job. Now, I think that's probably happening, but sometimes I still hear people saying, oh, I'll get to that tomorrow. No, that will perish like food left out on the counter. It should have been put in the fridge. So you need to cover your jobs. Second thing is you need to work your pipeline. Yes, we know job orders are down, blah, 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 but people are being hired. Right? Okay, some industries like hospitality in Melbourne, clearly, you know, that's on ice, but in most cases, there are still people being hired. And if they're not being hired now, clients are making their plans. There's only going to be a month and Melbourne will be open, and the rest of the country already is. So what are we doing to search our pipeline? And that means having an absolutely concerted, structured plan to cover the ground, including today from 9 till 10, I'm going to call 10 candidates or 20 candidates I lost track of in the last year, and I'm going to find out where they're up to, and I'm going to give them a bit of encouragement, but I'm also going to quietly be trying to work out if they're out on interview anywhere or get some market knowledge. Then I'm going to have a break and walk around the block. Then I'm going to call 15 of my clients that I haven't spoken to and call them with my chat, which is my narrative. I'm not going to call them and start saying, isn't it terrible what Dan did, and the footy's gone to Brisbane, and get into some downward spiral of negativity. I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to say, Mr. Client, got some information for you. I've been talking to 8 or 9 people in your industry, and most of them are beginning to look at hiring in blah, blah, blah. It's got to be true. I'm not saying tell any lies, but come up with a narrative. You've got to be providing people with information you've got to flip the dynamic. Most recruiters in Australia today, if they call their clients at all, are going to call them and say, have you got any jobs for me to fill? Don't do that. Call them to say, I've got some interesting information for you. You're in the logistics area. My clients in that area are working from, I know in Melbourne it's a bit different, but in the rest of the country, they're doing this about working from home. These are their plans with salary. This is how they're managing remotely. How are you doing it? Chat, chat, chat. A consultative narrative, right, is what's important. And then I'd say, okay, so I've called 15 clients, have another break, and then I'm going to call. I've got a lot of clients in the logistics area, but I've got a lot of companies I should find out about who are in logistics that I don't work with. So I'm going to call 10 prospects with a similar narrative. Structured, working through your pipeline. I'm going to search job ads on Seek, etc. I'm going to, all the things we know, but I'm going to do it in a structured way. So number 1, jobs in play, hammer them. Number 2, work your pipeline. Number 3, it's what I call continuous positive outbound engagement. What I mean by that is you've got to make sure that your day is filled up with outbound engagement where you leave the other person feeling better than they were before. I'm not talking about some hippie love thing. I'm talking about engaging with candidates. How's it going? What's happening with you? Let me give you some encouragement. Let me work with you on your LinkedIn profile. Let me look at your resume. Let me give you some advice. Good luck. Move on to the next one. Calling clients with information and news. Even calling your colleagues. You're feeling bad, but what about your mate who works in the accounting division and he lives on his own? He's been there for 6 weeks. How about giving him a call? See how he's going. Cheer him up. Suppliers, give them a call. Positive, continuous outbound engagement is the best measure. In 5 years' time or 10 years' time, all of us who work in recruitment today, especially the younger ones, your kids or whoever that comes along are going to say to you, what did you do in the COVID? This is going to be this is going to be like the Second World War or what they're going to say to you, what did you do in COVID? And I like to remind recruiters, it's not going to sound too good if you said, well, I watched every episode of Breaking Bad 10 times and I got fat and I complained for 3 months. It's going to be much better if you say, well, I'll help people get jobs. And if I couldn't help them get jobs, I encouraged them and gave them support. So jobs in play, work your pipeline, continuous outbound engagement. And then the 4th thing is amplify everything you're doing on LinkedIn and social media. But not silly memes about lockdown, not complaining, helpful insights, reinforcing positive things, bits of good news, connecting people, helping people, sharing other people's posts when they need it. I spend a lot of time, I'm not putting myself up as a very good example of this, but I will share anyone who wants to recruit a recruiter. I run status updates for them because I've got 300,000 recruiters connected or following me. So it can only do good, right? It can only help someone get a job. So that's not a big deal for me. It doesn't cost me anything. It doesn't even cost me much time. But it's, that's the sort of thing to be doing on social media, not going down the rabbit hole of whinging about how tough things are. So that's sort of my 4-point plan.
I totally agree. I think we need to raise our game and we need to do lots of things that we're not getting paid for, fundamentally.
Well, I think the thing to remember is, even if you're not getting an immediate return, you are still doing something that will lead to a return. You can imagine, when it picks up in a month in Melbourne, that somebody, a client might say, who's that recruiter who was always giving us positive updates? And who's that guy? He's good. And there he is on social media. I'll give him a call. That's the one, not the one who retrieved it and said, I'll sit this out. You'll be gone. So people say, I'm going to rise again on the wave of the recovery. The analogy is that the wave will wash right over you and leave you beached unless you're doing your stuff now. Unless you're be visible, be valuable. Consistent quality outbound engagement. You won't get the return that you used to measure in February, which was placements and job orders. You'll get some, but you're still creating goodwill. I call it goodwill equity. What I mean by that is you've got to create equity where people feel goodwill towards you because of the efforts you've put in, and that will come back. Equity means a share of ownership, and they will come back and you'll get a dividend on it in time. And even if you don't, you will have helped people out and left people happier than they were before you spoke to them. And that's a good thing just for what it is. It doesn't need a return.
Let's talk about the Australian recruitment industry holistically, and based on where we were as an industry and an economy before COVID, and looking at how we've reacted to GFCs previously. How do you think the Australian recruitment industry is going to bounce back in comparison to, say, the US, the UK economies and recruitment industries?
I don't know. I'm not an economist, but the US, still getting, what is it, 50,000 coronavirus cases a day or something. Hundreds of thousands of people are dying. I think they just reached some awful milestone. Having said that, I'm giving a webinar to a US recruitment industry body next week. Actually, that makes me nervous. I've just got to think about preparing it. But in the briefing I had, they're in accounting and finance money. They said they're pretty busy. They're placing people. Their temp numbers are holding up, and clients are employing remotely. It varies a lot from state to state. I think Australia will probably fare, well, certainly as well as any, and possibly better. Although our federal versus state system is a potential stumbling block to that, because I must admit, I don't know what you think, but I didn't realize prior to this pandemic that the states had as much power as they do.
No, not at all.
I really had no idea. I thought at the end of the day, Prime Minister could say, "Well, just bloody do it."
Yeah.
And while everyone's doing their best, and it's got to be careful about getting political. It was interesting when the Prime Minister said yesterday that if he applied the rules that the Premier of Victoria was applying, then Sydney would have to go into curfew now. And he said, we do not need a curfew. We're going great. So it was interesting. I don't know is the answer. I think Australia will do fine. We will suffer from our borders staying closed longer, I think. But I think we're basically in reasonable shape. I think our governments overall, all of them, have done a reasonable job, and maybe better than those other two countries you mentioned, frankly. So I'm quite optimistic.
Yeah. Okay. All right. You mentioned that you've been asked this question and asked it regularly about what the recruitment industry is going to look like at the back end of COVID. You've mentioned a couple of things. But yeah, holistically, how do you think our wonderful recruitment industry is going to look when this is all said and done?
I'll start with a long-term view. I think the sun will shine on our industry again. I think we will, in time, grow rapidly. I don't think we're under threat from COVID itself, and I don't think we're under threat from technology, which was what people were saying prior to COVID. I don't think the industry is under threat, but I do think certain companies and certain individuals are definitely threatened with the existential crisis, because if they don't adapt, they don't configure the future, they don't work out a different way to do it going forward, they just won't cope, and they won't have validity. I think the other thing to bear in mind is you really got to try and predict. Companies that were powerful before COVID will be weak afterwards. Companies that were not that significant prior to COVID are going to be strong. You know that logistics and IT and various other areas are going to grow more strongly, and others like hospitality and airlines will take years to recover. So we've got to be smart about which markets we tackle. I think the biggest thing we could do is to just take a view on how much work we've done in the past without being paid, and go for less work, fewer clients, but better quality work and better quality clients. That will give a great outcome to all stakeholders, recruiter, candidate, and client. I think our industry will be smaller. I think it will be potentially more consultative. I am a bit nervous about people dropping their fees to get a share of the pie as it expands. I encourage people not to dumb our industry down by doing that. Until we reach that full peak again, as I said, I think it will be like a bouncing medicine ball, slow, ponderous, but upwards. And I think there will be really, really great opportunities in the industry for those that are left and those who adapt.
Yeah, I think we've been spoiled for so long, haven't we? We've had it so good for so long. We didn't realize it. We took it for granted, and this is a short, sharp shock that has shook us to our cores. And
I think that's true. And I think, we saw it in, like the hiring of recruiters, and I know that's your field, but
yeah.
The model, let's just take a young likely grad of 23, throw him on a desk, give him a couple of weeks training, and she'll be right. That's how I started in recruitment. I got better training than that, but I started at 21, so I'm grateful for it, and there's still a place for that.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to build much more credible, consultative recruiters to thrive going forward. It's not to say you can't start your career at 23. I just don't think people are going to be able to, and particularly when you think, just imagine, this sort of gets into the work from home debate a bit. I'm 23, I've been given a few weeks training remotely, and now I'm working from home. And what are my chances of succeeding? Virtually none, I would say, because even with all that support around me, a small percentage of those people made it. So we're going to need to just rethink the sorts of people we hire, the sorts of training we give them, and the sorts of work we get them to do. We can't have all these people filling one job out of 4. It'd be better off having half the people filling, 9 out of 10.
Mm. But a greater focus on creating better, more rounded recruiters as a result of COVID sounds to me like a silver lining, right? And
if it, it's a potential silver lining, and I think it will definitely happen. I think smart companies will do it. I think as I said before, I think a lot of people will go back and just do what they've ever done before, and I think they will fail or live hand to mouth, But the problem with that is that then will drive them to drop their fees to get their share, and then that pushes the whole industry down. So I would love it if, we can't do this, but I'd love to get the whole industry in the room and say, let's agree. In fact, I think what I'm about to suggest is against the law. It's a cartel. But let's agree that we'll only take jobs exclusively. We'll only hire these sorts of recruiters. We'll become consultative. It's an irony to me that in recruitment, we love to look down on real estate agents and car salesmen. We like to think they're the only people. And yet real estate, they don't multi-list their houses, right? You got to give your house to one real estate agent, certainly in this state. And they will tie you up with a contract so tight that if you sell it somewhere else, you'll still have to pay them a fee. So here we are sort of thinking real estate agents are not as professional as we are. Actually, they've got a much better dynamic going on, much better model. And it leads to a much better service. Of course, there's good and bad real estate agents, like they're good and bad everything. But at least if they take on a listing, if they sell it, they'll get paid, good. But they won't have somebody gazump them because they can work properly on getting that house sold. Mm. We need the same thing. We need to get the job exclusively so we can do great work, earn our fee, take the problem away from the clients, and just present them with a solution which the client's happy to pay for. Instead of, 5 agencies scrambling over it, taking shortcuts to try and wang a resume in front of a client at the last minute.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in closing, Greg, you know, we've touched on and we've talked about silver linings a couple of times, and I think, look, to be honest, I think we have to. I think we have to seek the positives in this shitstorm. Yeah. And I personally believe, yeah, aside from the awful deaths that have happened all around the world, I honestly believe down the track the positives of COVID are going to start to outweigh the negatives. Personally and professionally, what do you believe are the top 2 or 3 silver linings that we can count on coming out of COVID?
Well, I think there's definitely many silver linings. For a start, I think we're all going to learn to be a bit more grateful. Mm-hmm. I hope we're going to learn to be a bit nicer to each other, and a little bit less snipey about our competitors, and just realize something I realized a long time ago, which is that everyone's fighting a good fight. Everyone's trying hard, and most people in our industry are good people. There's a few cowboys, but most people are good people just trying to do their best. So let's all just do that. Yeah. I think there's a chance to destroy transactional recruiting, which was dumbing down our industry, lowering margins, harming service and harming our reputation. I think there's a chance. The great silver lining is a chance to reinvent the things that weren't being done well and do them better. I think we can move more to a relationship-based industry rather than a resume flicking one. I think while the industry might be smaller, I think there's a chance for companies to really thrive coming out of this. I mean, I've been through, as I said, a number of recessions, and in at least 3 of them, I was running recruitment companies, and in each case, I was awful going through them, and sleepless nights, and just survived. But coming out was the making of those companies, and I mean, these in each case they became $100 million companies, and I can trace it back to the recession as where we looked in the mirror and got rid of things that weren't any good, and just were a bit more honest about what we were good at and not good at, and so there's plenty of benefits to be had. I think there'll be a technological benefit. I hope that people will realize that there are great technologies in recruitment which can be used to actually take up the hack work and free up the recruiter to be more consultative. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity there. So it's been very, very tough, and I think it will be for a while. And there've been some casualties, which is never good. But as I said before, the sun will shine on recruitment again. I absolutely predict that we will be front and center of putting our fractured labor market back together again. There's been massive job losses. A lot of people are working less hours than they want. A lot of people are in jobs that they hate, but are only holding on to them because they're glad to have a job. But when that starts to change, we will be the broker. We will be the agent. Well, we could be. And that's the opportunity and the big silver lining that will come out of this. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Greg. I didn't quite get the news that I was hoping for, that we were getting close to the crossing line of the marathon. But I was probably being naive to expect it. But there we go. That's all right.
It's only one sort of fairly uninformed person's opinion. We might be almost there. And now, don't forget that people need to get this book, Savage Truth.
Yeah,
which would be good. I'm not plugging the book because I'm trying to make a commercial success of it. It is very successful already, but all the proceeds of this book are going to the Bushfire Fund charity, which is ironic, isn't it? Only a year ago, that was the worst thing that happened to our country in a century. Yeah. But there's still a lot of people suffering there. So it's not about making money, but I do think there's a lot of good lessons in that book for people. There's stories of past recessions and what thinking you need to come out of it. So I hope people will get the book, get it via my website, and that would be great.
It did occur to me, Greg, that you're going to have to put pen to paper again, jump into the Savage Truth and add a special COVID chapter at the back.
Well, that might have to be a separate book, but no, I think I'll leave that to somebody else. I've done my, that's my, that's my book. There's no more. Although my blog is weekly, and I'm always updating that. So I guess I'm still sort of recalibrating, because it's been a fascinating learning experience for me. I mean, I have learned a great deal in the last 6 months, some of which I've shared today. But I'm learning from my clients who are doing clever things. I'm learning from, I talked to a lot of recruiters and how they've dealt with it. I mean, none of us have been through lockdowns. None of us have been through actual whole industries being closed by law. I mean, I told you in February, airlines won't fly, all pubs will be closed. You wouldn't believe me, of course. So none of us have tried to consult working from home. These are all completely new learnings, and we've got to, as I said, it's very important to say, this is the way it is. How do I turn it into a positive? You know, how do I get good at this new way of doing things?
Yeah.
Because if we say the marathon's nearly over and soon it'll be like it was before, I think we're going to wait a long, long time. May never be. You know, do you think that candidates are ever going to want to go back into a recruitment company for a face-to-face interview, regardless of COVID? No, I don't think that's going to be a common way to interview candidates. And if that's the case, do we need 8 interview rooms that are empty all the time in our recruitment companies? Yeah. You know, it's just so much to reinvent and to think freshly about. That's just very basic, but so much.
I think it's exciting. Yeah. I look forward to the future. I look forward to what we look like when we get through this. Well, Greg, thank you once again. Hey, listen, I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to you, not only for appearing on the podcast, but for your regular contribution to the recruitment industry. Yeah, a lot of which I know you don't get paid for. You know, you're just doing it because you care about the industry. I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of quite a lot of people when I say thank you for that.
Well, thank you for mentioning that. I guess it's the least one can do. Recruitment's given me, well, a lot, including 2 wives so far. So I should be grateful. That's not a joke. I both worked as recruiters.
Yeah, there's another podcast right there. I hope you make it back to South Africa. That beautiful picture behind you. I hope you get back there soon.
Well, the British Lions are playing the Springboks next year, and I would very much like to see some of those games, but I'm not sure. Who knows what the world will look like, mate? We just go day to day.
We do.
100-day plan, 100-day sprints. That's what we do. Okay.
Thank you, Greg. All the best. Cheers.
Bye.